At around €230, this phone looks hard to ignore. You get an 8000 mAh battery and a huge AMOLED screen. But there's a catch. Poco didn't give you everything at this price. So, is the M8 Power actually worth buying in 2026? Yes, if battery life matters most to you, but if you want serious gaming or great cameras, think twice. At first, the M8 Power seems pretty straightforward. Big screen, huge battery, and a low price. But the details make this phone more interesting. Some of them could make it a great deal. Others might make you look elsewhere. The first thing you notice is the weight. At 225 grams, this isn't a lightweight phone. It feels solid in your hand, especially during longer sessions. The body is 8.5 mm thick, which keeps things fairly reasonable. It's not a slim phone, but it doesn't feel ridiculously bulky either. You also get an IP65 rating for dust and water protection. That means light splashes and everyday exposure aren't a major concern. The front uses Gorilla Glass 7i for added protection. The phone also comes in black, green, and blaze orange, so the design keeps things simple, practical, and fairly tough. That weight becomes easier to understand when you look at the battery. The biggest feature here is clearly the battery. Poco has fitted an 8000 mAh cell inside the M8 Power. That's much larger than what you usually see at this price. The main benefit is simple: more room before you need a charger. You can spend longer on social media, YouTube, maps, and calls. Gaming will also have more battery to work with. The phone also supports 45W wired charging. You can reverse charge other devices at 22. It's not the fastest charging speed in this category. Still, 45W is useful with a battery this large. There's another feature that caught my attention: 5W. So the phone can also act like a wired power bank. That's useful for earbuds, watches, or another phone. The big battery does have one obvious downside though. All that extra capacity adds weight to the phone, but a big battery means little if performance falls behind. And this is probably the biggest compromise. The M8 Power uses Qualcomm Snapdragon 4 Gen 4. You can pair it with either 6GB or 8GB of RAM. Storage starts at 128GB using UFS 2.2. There's also a dedicated microSD slot for extra storage. For basic everyday tasks, this hardware should be enough. Apps like Chrome and YouTube won't push it too hard. Opening apps should feel fine, but don't expect instant flagship response. The 8GB version should handle multitasking more comfortably. The extra memory becomes useful when switching between several apps. Gaming is where you'll notice the chipset's limits more clearly. Casual games should be perfectly manageable. More demanding titles will likely need lower graphics settings. The Adreno 613 GPU isn't aimed at serious mobile gaming, so this isn't the phone to buy for maximum gaming performance. It's more focused on getting normal tasks done without fuss. And there's another useful point here. The dedicated microSD slot lets you add more storage later. That's especially handy if 128GB starts feeling tight. Overall, the performance setup makes sense for this price range. Just don't expect this chipset to compete with upper mid-range phones. Performance matters, but there's another part you'll notice constantly. Then there's the display, and this one gets a lot right. You get a 7-inch AMOLED panel with a 1080 by 2396 resolution. That gives you a huge canvas for videos, reading, and games. The AMOLED panel also brings deeper blacks and strong contrast. It supports a 120Hz refresh rate, which you'll notice while scrolling. Pages move more naturally, and animations feel less choppy. This also helps when you're moving through menus or browsing websites. Then there's the 1800 nit peak brightness. That matters most when you're using the phone outdoors. Strong sunlight can make darker screens difficult to read. Higher brightness gives the panel more room to handle those conditions. The display also covers around 88.2% of the front, so most of what you see is actual screen. For watching content, the extra size makes a noticeable difference. Reading long articles also feels less cramped on a panel this large. Gaming gets more room for controls and visual details too. The resolution isn't the highest you'll find in this price range, but for this screen size, 1080 by 2396 still makes sense, and the 120Hz refresh rate adds a nice touch to daily use. The screen gets plenty of attention. The camera takes a simpler route. Camera clearly isn't the priority here. The main camera uses a 50MP sensor with PDAF. On paper, that's a familiar setup for this price range. PDAF should also help the camera lock focus more quickly. For daylight shots, you have enough resolution for everyday photography. Photos of people, food, documents, and places are the obvious use cases. The camera records video at 1080p and 30 frames per second. That's fine for basic clips and casual social media posts, but there is no 4K recording option here. The selfie camera is an 8MP sensor. It also records at 1080p and 30 frames per second. That should be enough for video calls and simple selfies. Things become more limited when you want more flexibility. There isn't a dedicated ultra-wide or telephoto camera, so you're mainly working with the main sensor. Night photography will also depend heavily on available light. Without proper camera samples, there's no reason to promise amazing results. The same goes for video stabilization and low light performance. What we can say confidently is pretty simple. This is a straightforward camera setup without many extras. It covers the basics and keeps the feature list uncomplicated. If you mainly need everyday photos, that's what this camera targets. The cameras keep things simple, but the software has more to offer. On the software side, the M8 Power runs Android 16. Xiaomi adds its HyperOS 3 interface on top. The good news is software support looks pretty solid. Poco promises up to 4 major Android updates. That's useful if you plan to keep the phone for years. You also get an under-display fingerprint scanner for unlocking. NFC is available too, although that depends on your region. There's also an IR blaster, which is a nice extra. It can control compatible TVs and other home devices. For wireless connections, you get Wi-Fi 6 and Bluetooth 5.1. USB-C handles charging and wired connections. The phone also has stereo speakers for audio. These are small details, but they make daily use easier. Nothing here feels overly complicated. The software package is pretty straightforward and practical. Now we can finally see what that €230 price gets you. The M8 Power is a pretty unusual package. You get a phone built around a few clear priorities. The battery is huge, the screen is large, and the software support is decent. But performance and cameras aren't its strongest areas. So, is the Xiaomi POCO M8 Power worth buying in 2026? If you want long battery life and a big everyday phone, yes. If gaming performance or photography matters most, I'd look elsewhere. And that brings us back to the real question. Would you personally take 8,000 mAh over stronger performance? Because at €230, that's the choice Poco is really asking you to make. And honestly, that's what makes the M8 Power interesting.